Going to be doing a string art lesson using a darning needle and some colored string, and we'll be creating a fun radial pattern over an interesting patterned background. Here we go. Depending on the materials you have at home, I'm going to give you 3 choices on how to make an interesting pattern design for the background of your radial string art. Here's the first one. This is creating a crayon design using some lines and shapes, and then a watercolor resist on top. Watch as I do this simply with just one color over top of my construction paper crayon design. Second choice for creating an interesting pattern design for the background of your string art would be to use your markers. I'm just using some warm colors here and making some big bold stripes, continuing the same pattern until the end of the cardstock. For your third and final choice, you might need some special supplies that might not be laying around the house. I use liquid watercolor, but you can absolutely use food coloring for this. First, you'll need some shaving cream. Just the regular old aerosol can will work fine. It's like $1. I sprayed a little bit on a plastic tray, but you could use a paper plate. Drip some liquid watercolor or food coloring. 2 colors is all you need. And use a stick or a dowel rod or a paintbrush, whatever you have, and gently swirl them together to make a pattern. Put your template on top and give it a little back massage, making sure that the color covers the whole paper. Peel it off. And then I used a piece of cardboard to scrape off the excess shaving cream. Let your marble print dry and throw away your cardboard and messy mat. After you finish the pattern on your white hole punched template, get your string and your darning needle and follow along with the rest of the video. I decided to use my simple striped marker design. I looked at my choices of string and I picked 2 contrasting colors that I thought would stand out next to each other and against the background. I have a thin rectangle piece that I cut out of a little scrap piece of paper. It's going to help me thread my needle. It's kind of like a shuttle, so here's what you'll do. You'll fold your little rectangle paper in half, slide the end of the yarn inside, fold it up, and then gently slide it through the eye or opening of your needle. If you can thread your needle without it, great. The next step, just tie those 2 threads in a knot. Pretend they're your shoelaces. Cross them like an X, one over the other, and pull, and you can even do that 2 times. Here we go. Okay, now that you have your darning needle threaded and it tied on, be aware that with the knot here, there's gonna be a little lump. So when you're going through the holes, it might be a little tricky. So let's start on the back. And for this radial design, it's important to know that all of the lines are going to radiate from one spot in the back. So if you want to take a crayon or a marker or something and mark the spot that you're beginning on, then it'll be helpful. Now I'm going to take my threaded needle and I'm going to start on the back. So I'm going to go through that hole that I've already identified, and I'm going to go through and keep pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling. Oops, I got a little knot there. I think I made mine a little bit longer than yours, but that's okay, until I get to the end. And then you'll need a piece of tape. Any kind of tape will do, even a sticker. I'm actually going to tear it in half and save this little bit for later and go ahead and tape it down. It's really important when you tape that you either tape it off to the side out of the way or towards the middle, but do not tape over this hole because your needle is going to keep going through this hole over and over and over again, and it won't be able to as easily if you tape it. Okay, to create this radial design with my first color, which I'm actually going to use black, so I'm going to flip this upside down. I'm going to take my needle and go to the first dot, and then from the back to this dot. Second dot, back to this dot, third dot, back to this dot, and so on like this. So here we go. I went from the back to the front. I'm ready for my first stitch. I'm going to the first dot, pulling all the way through, and then back to my home base, my home dot. We'll call it the home dot. Pulling all the way through. Second dot. Pulling all the way through. and then back to my home dot. Pulling all the way through. Third dot. From the back, go back to my home. Pulling all the way through. Fourth dot. Back to my home dot. Next. And I'm just creating this radial design all the way around with my first color. Every time, going back to my home dot. It almost looks like a seashell, doesn't it? Every time the same. Back to my home. Back to my home. Oh, I hope I made mine long enough. I think I did. Back to my home, and then finally, my last color. So there's the first part of my radial design. I'll flip it over. I'll use my scissors and trim. And again, you want to make sure that when you tape it, it's out of the way of all your holes because we're going to be using some of them again. All right, let's do our second color. Okay, now I'm ready for my second color. I can try to thread my needle on my own, or I can use my little piece of paper to help thread like before. Another trick I like to use is to twist the end and then gently fold it and wiggle it through. All right, I'm gonna tie it on because I think that definitely helps. So imagine they're your shoelaces, cross them like an X, wrap one on the other and pull. And you could even do it twice so it stays for sure. Keep in mind though, that does make a little bump when you go through the holes, but I think it'll be okay. So now I'm doing the same thing, but I'm gonna pick a new spot to be my home dot that I will radiate all my lines from, and it does not matter where. I'm gonna try to go almost directly across. I think I'll pick this one, and I'm gonna take a new color and mark it to help me remember. And I'm gonna start from the back. Take my threaded needle, and just like last time, pull all the way through. And then get another little piece of tape and tape it either in the center, I think this time I'll go in the center, or off to the side, just as long as it doesn't cover your holes or hang off. We don't want it to look messy. And then same pattern again. Flip my piece over and we'll go the first dot back to home base, second dot back to home base, third dot back to home base, fourth dot back to home base, and so on. I'm going to start slowly and then I'll speed it up since you've already seen this process again. All right, first dot, back to my home. Pull all the way through every time. Second dot. Back to my home. Radial design. We learned how to thread a needle, we learned how to do some stitches, and we put it all together to make this cool radial pattern. I love it. So now I want all these yucky tape pieces to be stuck behind. Make sure you've trimmed any yarn. You should have a black square in your art supply kit that I gave you at the beginning of this quarter. And you can probably use any type of glue for this. Even hot glue would work. I'm just gonna use Elmer's liquid glue. You might have this at home. A glue stick might even work. I'm gonna put glue around the frame and mount it onto my nice neat black construction paper. I'm gonna try really hard to make sure it's in the center. And I'll hold it down. Maybe count to 20. You might have to let this dry pretty well somewhere at home. And then if you want to, you can keep it plain, or you can use your construction paper crayons to make a border around the edge. With one of my examples, I had some metallic markers. I made a pattern around the edge, but you get to be the artist to decide. I think it looks kind of cool just like this. So anyways, I can't wait to see yours.